All right. So yeah, we're finally together in the same room. You know, we're able to talk about some things, and today I think we're gonna get into something very interesting. You know,
Yeah.
it's been a long time in the making. I know I say that a lot, but this time is actually true.
Well, it's wonderful to have you in the Sunshine State.
Hey, thanks for having me,
Yeah.
man. Thanks for having me. You know, it's very warm. I feel welcomed. All right. So yeah, today I want to start out, man, by talking about the U.S., our relationship to China, and let's start out by talking about TikTok. What's your feelings about that? I mean, you know, there's a lot of mixed feelings right now.
So there are a lot of very passionate people on both sides of the political spectrum that are really ranting and raving about TikTok.
Right.
But it's interesting that the people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who were railing against Google and railing against Twitter and Facebook and all these places, saying that they weren't censoring enough.
Right.
They're saying that we need to pump the brakes on trying to censor TikTok,
Right.
and we need to that we need to make sure that TikTok is able to exercise their First Amendment rights. That we need to allow, that we need to back up and just allow TikTok to have the liberty that she was so skeptical of leaving Twitter and the American social media platforms. Now, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that the same rule that applies to one should apply to all.
Right.
And now, if TikTok is taking personal data of people and handing it over to the Chinese government or Chinese intelligence or something, then that's something that American citizens ought to be made aware of.
Right.
But at the same time, I do not think that the U.S. government should be in the business of banning,
Social media platforms.
social media platforms.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so maybe a lot of people probably, on one side or the other, probably feel like this is sort of a retaliatory measure, right? You know, you say, well, if you're gonna try to ban, social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook or whatever, then we need to ban TikTok too, right? But then not only that, you hear people saying things like TikTok is creating, sort of a social virus, with young people, right? It's not a good medium for younger kids, right? They're either spending too much time on there, and that's what China wants, right? They want to use TikTok as a way to distract and get children away from being able to be focused, right? As far as education goes, stuff like that. I mean, I think there is some merit in saying that, to some extent, because I mean, social media, just in general, I think causes, a lot of, what do you want to call it?
Like social contagion, and
distraction, yeah, an inability to like focus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And and of course, I do think the surveillance thing, I mean, you could say that about just about any social media platform. I don't know if it's just TikTok, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, we know that all these social media platforms are collecting all kinds of data on us.
Right.
What do they call it? The I think they call it the metadata,
Right.
or something. They collect all that, they repackage it, and they sell it. They sell it off, and that's how they make a lot of their money.
Yeah.
But I do think if you're an American citizen and your data is being handed over to, is being repackaged and sold off to anyone, I think that information ought to be disclosed to you.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
especially if it's a foreign actor of some kind.
Right.
But at the same time, I would say the same thing about our government.
Right.
If Facebook is collecting Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, if they're collecting, if they're packaging up your metadata and then they're handing it over to the NSA, I think that you should also be made aware of that too.
Right.
And you should be given the option to opt out of it,
Yeah.
or at the very least it should be disclosed to you, and you should be told, well, all of your profile information from 2016 to 2019, we just handed it over to the NSA, or in TikTok's case, we just handed it over to the Chinese intelligence agencies.
Right.
That ought to be made aware, or that's something that you should be made aware of as a user of that platform.
Right.
And I do think that ought to be a law.
Right. Right. Now let me ask you this question. This we're gonna go deeper here with the whole Chinese thing, because look, man, there's a sort of, I don't want to say two ends of the spectrum, when it comes to the Chinese government in the United States, but I want to say there's a lot of mixed emotions and a lot of different interpretations about our relationship with China. Not just TikTok, right, and that social media, but like, where our geopolitical concerns lie, right? So, for instance, Joe Biden, right? He says, well, the real threat to the United States and democracy is Russia, right? But then, dear brother Steve Bannon, he says, our real we are not an Atlantic power. This is what he said. I'm paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. He said this in his talk with Royce White, who I admire. He's a good podcaster, former basketball player. He said that on his show, Please Call Me Crazy. And his whole thing was basically that our real strength is in the Pacific, right? So I guess my question is, a lot of people do think China is a real threat to the United States, like geopolitically and just, in general, mm-hmm. right? And then there are others who believe that, Russia is a real threat. But now here's the thing. Just a few weeks ago, we're seeing China and Russia linking arms, right? They've now sort of become buddies, mm-hmm. Well, I think, I don't think they really had any real, they were never real enemies with each other,
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the Chinese and the Russians, historically, they've always hated each other. Okay. And it has been the foreign policy of this administration mm-hmm. that really pushed them together.
Okay.
You got to remember that Russia and China are historically, they've always been very different, mm-hmm. Qualitatively. Mm-hmm. From the type of an empire the American empire is, from the type of empire the British have been, mm-hmm. and even the type of empire that the French have been, which the French I kind of say are kind of in between. Mm-hmm. But there are two types of empires. There are land empires and there are sea empires.
Right.
And land empires are exactly what it sounds like. Mm-hmm. They derive their power from controlling territory.
Okay.
And dominating territory.
Right.
And Russia, I mean, they make up like 1/5 of the world's land, or they right. own 1/5 of the world's land, or something like that.
Right.
And then China, that's another massive land mass.
Yeah.
And India to a degree, mm-hmm. But also Iran, which mm-hmm. used to be called Persia, mm-hmm. What was a historically land power. Mm-hmm. Then you had a lot of the European powers were historically were sea powers,
right.
with the exception of Germany.
Okay.
Right. Now Greece, mm-hmm. Athens was a sea power. Mm-hmm. And then Britain was a sea power. America was a sea power. And the big difference is that sea powers project their power across the world using the oceans.
Right.
Land powers project their power by their ownership and control of land territory.
Right.
And usually the two end up having big catastrophic collisions with one another. And the problem is, in my opinion, I think that what we have done is we have pushed two massive land powers that historically had a lot of differences, and there was a big mimetic rivalry in many ways between Russia and China. We have pushed them together because we have made them both identify us as a common enemy.
Right.
And it's all because we want to be able to project our power, which we project power over the sea. We want to be able to project it right on the coast of China.
Right.
And that's really what this whole thing is over. It's over what are the limitations of America's ability to project its power across the seas unchecked, and how far out is China allowed to assert its dominance over its seas.
Right. Right. I mean, you've got now you said something here where you said China, because of its sort of inability to push further out into the Pacific, right? China. So China doesn't have an ability to, what'd you say? Produce a lot of.
Are you talking about like food and energy?
Yeah, food and energy.
Yeah.
Right?
So China has a lot of resources. They've got a lot of rare earth metals, which are necessary for like the whole green tech revolution, and cobalt and all kinds of stuff. They've got a lot of lithium and stuff in China. But one thing they lack a lot of, which are the basics, they don't have much in the way of coal and oil, especially, and they don't have the ability to produce enough food to feed their country.
Right.
So the problem that China has always been China's chief problem. Now the interesting thing is that Russia, on the other hand, is exceptionally resource rich.
Okay.
They are loaded with oil, loaded with the ability to produce lots and lots and lots of food.
Yeah. Loaded with diamonds.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, massive,
Yeah.
And the thing is that China, because there's been this big historical rivalry between China and Russia, and land disputes, being land powers, that's what they always want to fight over is land. There's always been a wall of separation between them. But because America has been kind of gallivanting around the world in such a confused fashion, like with no matter how someone feels about the Ukraine thing, I mean, anybody with a brain could tell that us demanding that Ukraine not remain neutral, and that NATO acquire Ukraine as a base on Russia's border, that was going to upset the Russians.
Right.
And so Russia would view the United States as being its enemy,
Right.
Obviously with us supporting the war and everything. And then on the other end of the world, China, with us provoking all the stuff with Taiwan, us sending Nancy Pelosi there, and her declaring that Taiwan is independent and everything,
Right.
which, our whole policy regarding Taiwan has always been, well, since the early 70s, we recognize one China. We recognize Taiwan as being a part of China, but we recognize Taiwan as being its own separate government.
Okay.
It's kind of a confusing thing, but that is what has maintained peace.
Right.
And
so you mean like the United States not really asserting the fact that Taiwan is its own state, but saying that Taiwan is allowed to kind of govern its own affairs,
right,
internally, or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, the Chinese have never recognized Taiwan as being its own state. And I guess probably what we need to do is go back and look at the history of China. In 1949, the civil war in China came to a conclusion. The communists under under Mao won, and the anti-communist forces, I hesitate to call them like the forces of liberty or anything, because Chiang Kai-shek was more a fascist than he was anything.
Right.
But he would have been better for China than Mao. But Chiang Kai-shek and all of the anti-communist forces in China, they got kicked off the mainland and they went to Taiwan, and that's where they went. And in fact, him and his forces, they actually removed a lot of old Chinese artifacts from museums and stuff along the way. Thank God they did, because Mao in the 50s proceeded to destroy a lot of ancient Chinese artifacts.
Right. He tried to even destroy the whole, the people that understood, the academics.
Yes.
Right? He removed the academics, basically just tried to uproot history in general.
Big time.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, please continue.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So then we jumped in and supported Taiwan, and America sent aircraft carriers into the South China Sea, and we told the communist Chinese forces, this was in the early 50s, I think this was under Truman. We said you back off of Taiwan. This is where the anti-communist Chinese are going to live, at least for now. We didn't make any real declarative statements. We just said we have a bigger stick than you do.
Yeah.
Don't cross over the South China Sea to Taiwan. Right. So Taiwan kind of grew up as its own separate group of Chinese people. I forget what region. The majority of Taiwanese are from one particular region of China. I forget what region it is.
They're not Han Chinese.
That I don't know. Okay. I want to say that they're not, but I know they all come from one particular geographic region.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the reasons that Cantonese is inherently different from what would be developed as Mandarin.
Right.
I mean, they're still. I think it's still intelligible to one another, but they're distinctly different.
Okay.
But the whole reason I say that is that it's always been this. Taiwan's always been kind of this gray area.
Right.
But by the Biden administration changing the policy, and saying that we recognize Taiwan as being its own separate, independent country, is a radical shift from what our policy had been previously, and this is provoking war with the Chinese.
Okay.
And really, when you step back and you look at it, President Xi of China, who I don't think he's a great man or anything, but the Chinese have been dropping hints saying, tone it down, please. Stop going to Taiwan and asserting Taiwanese independence. It's something we're willing to just kind of keep it on the back burner. But it just seems like our country is wanting to go over there and just stir stuff up, just like we're doing in Ukraine, in my opinion, of course.
Right. Right. Now, would you say that the United States, has Would you say the state of affairs with the Pacific and with China is much more of a threat as far as, leading to a third world war, right? Like, this is something that a lot of people keep alluding to, that, we're headed towards, a third world war. First of all, let me just ask, in your opinion, do you think that that's true? Right? I mean, I think with, even if you say, okay, well, Russia and China didn't really get along now. I mean, before, we can see that they are now, right? And that's starting to become more of the case. So, first of all, who do we really have as allies if something like that takes place, right? And then secondly, do you think we're on the verge of really being headed into something like that? I mean, because I don't, man. I know a lot of people talk about nuclear warfare, right, and stuff like that, but I just I can't imagine something like that happening, given the fact that every political leader knows exactly what that's going to lead to, which is ultimate destruction of the world, of mankind, right? So completely. I'm trying to see an alternative here, but I mean, yeah. Do you, I mean?
Well, I think our interest, first and foremost, if we want to try to maintain the American empire, which I think that's a completely that's a different conversation from, I think we have to ask the question, is it worth America maintaining unchallenged global dominance, militarily and economically in an unfair way? Would that be worth going to war over? And I don't think it is. I think we would be much better off trying to set up a world where there are common laws that govern the seas, and a world that's a little bit more multipolar. And I think whether we like it or not, that's the world that's emerging now.
Right.
But as far as our interest goes, I think it's definitely in the Pacific, because you think about, we have the Aleutian Islands in the Pacific.
Right.
South Korea is kind of a satellite of the United States. Japan is a satellite of the United States.
Right.
The Philippines, we kind of have a weird relationship with them. Then we've also got Guam, and we've got American Samoa, and we have obviously Hawaii. We have a lot. I think we have a lot more interest in the Pacific, and I do think when push comes to shove, we will leave the Europeans high and dry,
Right.
so that we can go and defend our interest, which is in the Pacific. I mean, a large part of the world's trade travels through the South Pacific.
Right. Right.
That's where our interest lies. It's not in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if the Europeans can't get their act together, then that's going to be on them.
Right. Yeah. I guess they don't really have they're not, in my opinion, they're not really taking much of their fair share.
Right.
In particular, like what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Right. If they're so into this idea of democracy within the region, then maybe they should play a little more of a role in trying to, make that happen. Stop using the United States as a go-between.
And if they'd be willing to go and fight a nuclear war with Russia over the abstract concept of democracy, then maybe countries like France should start to act more democratic.
Right.
The French people are furious that Emmanuel Macron, sidestepped the assembly, just completely sidestepped it, disregarded the will of the people, and bumped the retirement age from 62 to 64.
Right.
Now in America, we probably look at that and say, well, 62?
It's not a big deal.
62 to 64, like Americans don't, a lot of Americans will never even retire.
Right.
But the thing is, that's a process issue. If democracy is the process you're willing to go and fight a war over and die in a nuclear war to spread democracy around the world,
right,
then how dare you sidestep democracy at home?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. Well, now I want to ask about the U.S. economy, right? And we talk about the fact that we're seeing an increase, or there will be an increase in interest rates, right?
And we're already seeing it,
right? Right. This was said probably maybe about 2 weeks ago, and so what sort of effects? Because I'm trying to break this down for people, including myself, who don't really understand what happens when interest rates go up, right? Like the kind of financial blowback on regular people, right? We know that economics is a dismal science, right? But hopefully we can sort of break that down and just help people understand what that's going to mean for their pockets.
Well, so first and foremost, interest rates, whenever they're talked about, it always, people get very passionate about them. But unfortunately, I think interest rates for most people, they think of them as just being some far off abstract idea,
right,
that really doesn't impact their life, like some random decision that the EPA or something would make,
right,
but they actually really impact our lives very, very much. And the reason is that one of the ways, so the government, through the Federal Reserve Bank, which is our central bank, they basically print as much money as they want and throw it into circulation.
Right.
And they do that by lowering interest rates.
Right.
Now, if they do that by lowering interest rates, that's not the only way they do it, but a big way of them doing it is by lowering interest rates. If a big way of them pumping more money into the system is by lowering interest rates, what do you think a way of them sopping up extra money in the system is? It's by raising the interest rates, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Raising the interest rates.
So now the thing is, when you lower interest rates, it makes everybody feel like the economy's roaring,
Right.
and things are better than they've ever been, and people think that the prosperity is going to keep on going.
Right. A booming economy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. It's called the boom cycle. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And then what ends up happening is you end up having inflation.
Right.
You know, because what ends up happening down the road is you don't end up having enough stuff in the economy for people to keep trading at a very fast pace.
Okay.
You know, because the more money you flood into the system, the more trading happens in the economy. The more houses get bought, the more cars get bought,
Right.
the more stuff gets bought at the grocery store, and so on.
Yeah.
So when they start removing money from the economy, and the reason they have to remove it, it's not because they're doing it because they want to be mean or something. They're doing it because if they don't, then prices will start spiraling out of control.
Okay.
You know, instead of paying $3 for a dozen eggs,
Right.
then people start paying $6. Then people start paying $7. Then $8. Then $9. Then $10.
Right.
And so in order to maintain a civilized order in society, they do have to raise interest rates to counterbalance the effect of lowering them. Because when you lower them at first, I guess you can kind of think about it like if you drink a big old cup of coffee, you know, and you feel great, right? I mean, you feel great. You feel energized and everything.
You're fueled.
Yep. Yeah. You're fueled. Yeah. And then what happens after a few hours pass, maybe like 4 or 5 hours, then you don't feel as fueled anymore.
Yeah.
Then eventually
You crash.
yeah, you crash.
Right. Yeah.
Now you can do one of two things. You can drink another cup of coffee, right?
Right.
And that'll game your system again, and you're gonna feel fueled.
Right.
But then after that cup of coffee wears off, you're gonna be even more worn down.
Right.
Now the thing is, eventually you're gonna have to go to sleep, right? Yeah, you have to. Otherwise your heart will stop.
Right.
So you have to rest in order to make up for that energy burst that you had as a result of the caffeine.
Right.
Lowering interest rates is sort of like drinking coffee. You know,
Okay.
it's like an artificial injection of energy into the economy.
Right.
But what ends up happening is the economy has to slow down because in a sense you're borrowing from the future to juice the economy in the present in the same way that you're borrowing your future energy
Right.
in the moment, and that's going to make you feel more tired later on.
Right.
Well, that's what ends up happening with the economy. The feeling tired later on is like prices going up.
Okay.
Then the way that you have to like suck the extra money out of the economy is you have to raise the interest rates.
Right.
Now, when you raise the interest rates, what that does is it starts to slow the economy down.
Right.
And a result of that is prices start to go down.
Right.
But the worst part, the people that pay the ultimate price for it are the working class and the middle class.
Right.
Because what happens is they lose their jobs
Right.
because the economy slows down. Their homes lose value, and they're the ones that end up paying the price.
Right.
And so all these politicians and stuff will say, well, we got to tighten up our belts. Really what they mean is you working people, you got to tighten your belts.
Right.
So it's a difficult situation. They have to raise, I mean, we can't sustain these rates of inflation because at the same time, raising the interest rates is going to hurt poor people because it's going to put them out of work. But if we keep inflation, if we keep pumping money into the system and we keep inflating the currency and the prices keep going up at a faster pace, poor people can afford to buy less food.
Right.
And then that'll make them go homeless too. So it's a problem of what do you do?
Right. So here's my question then. Why do we have people like Janet Yellen, and the press secretary and Joe Biden and, every, I don't know, you can add more people to that.
And
You know,
Jerome Powell, of course, right?
right. Why do they keep making it sound like the economy is steady and the economy is going well? Is that only for like public consumption so that people feel better about what's getting ready to happen to them?
Well, among economists, there's something they call it the wealth effect, and it's very simple. It's if people feel like things are, if people feel like the economy is going well, then the economy is going to be fine.
So wait a minute. Let me just let me just back up here. So that sounds like a psychological tool
It is.
to make people feel comfortable. If the government tells you it's going to be okay, then you're going to be okay.
Well,
You're going to be okay.
yeah, and that's what they want for you to believe,
Right.
because the thing is, at that point, you're not going to make any rash decisions.
Right.
You're not going to go and hoard food.
Right.
You're not going to go and try to unload your stocks
Right.
or try to sell your house or something.
Or take all your money out the
Yeah,
bank.
take your money out of the bank, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
But the problem is that by them lying and saying that things are okay when they're not, what they're doing is they're setting themselves up financially so that whenever the storm does hit, they're going to be fine.
Okay.
But then when the storm hits, it's going to be everyone else is going to get screwed.
Right.
And that's how they roll. That's the way that they do things.
Okay. So now that we know the real forecast, right? Let's talk about what normal people. Well, okay, I don't want to say normal people because then it makes it sound like people who have a lot of money are not
Well,
normal.
normal people like us,
Yeah.
like
just
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, what can people, who are not as financially stable, or even if they are financially stable, don't have they got to start paying attention to their accounts, right?
well, and Shannon, this is something I'll say is how some people like if you ever watch like the news or something, they'll bring some economist on, and the economist will be saying, well, in times of trouble, you want to buy this stock,
Right.
And you want to buy this, and you want to buy this. Well, I'll tell you this. I didn't grow up in a family where we had money to buy stocks or we had money to buy to invest or anything.
Right.
We had money to go to the grocery store and that was it.
Right.
So
Right.
the things that I would tell people is first of all, for most people, a stock market is like a giant casino.
Yeah.
But the thing I would say is you can bet your bottom dollar that prices are going to be higher in 10 years than they are today. You're going to pay more for the things that you use on a regular basis in 5 years than you're paying for them today. And that doesn't really, interest rates don't really matter as far as that stuff goes because they're always printing money, pushing it into the system. But so the thing I would recommend is think about the shoes you like to buy. If you can find them on sale, I'd recommend, instead of going and dumping money into the stock market or something, I'd recommend going and buying some extra pairs of shoes that are going to cost more in 5 years. Because those don't have an expiration date on them.
Right.
And the thing is, let's say those are going to cost, let's say they're going to double in price 5 years from now. That means that in 5 years' time, you've doubled your money.
Right.
But the thing is, and this is something to always remember, the government cannot tax you on money that you don't spend.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Right. So this is more like you should buy assets, or you should start purchasing assets that build value over time.
Well, and think about it because remember, everything is an asset. Cans of beans are assets,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Like shoes are assets, clothing
Yeah.
are assets. And so, I think we're taught from a very young age to separate out to think about the things that we use on a daily basis, like our clothes and let's say cans of beans and stuff like that that are good for years and years and years.
Yeah.
We tend to think about those in a different way than we do investments.
Right. And I guess the only reason why I smirked about that idea of buying cans of beans was because to me, it sounds like things are going to get that bad to where you're not going to be able to afford beans. And
Well,
that
I'm
sounds very
Cuban,
scary.
so I eat beans all the time. You know, that's cans of beans are staples
Okay.
for
Okay.
me. Yeah,
Right.
but the thing is, like, if you can find, if cans of beans are something that you eat on a regular basis, or let's say you're Italian and it's tomato sauce.
Right.
You know, if you can find it on sale at the store,
Yeah.
let's say 2 for 1, or
Right.
let's say you've got coupons or something for it,
Right.
then I would say buy those up.
Yeah.
Don't buy things when you need them. If you're in a position that you can do that, buy things when they're affordable.
Right.
Buy things when they're at a discount, because the thing is, you know, a lot of people talk about, oh, I made 5% last year by putting my money in a CD at the bank, or I made 10% on the stock market last year or something. And people will never tell you when they lose money, ever. If people lose money, you're never going to hear about it.
Right.
But the thing is, whatever gain they made, they had to pay taxes on that.
Right.
They might have had to pay. Let's say that 5% they made. Let's say that was $50 on a CD. That they would have had to pay, probably, like, out of that $50, they probably would have had to pay $10 or $15 to the government in taxes. Well, let's say that you spent $50 less on shoes over a 2-year period. The government can't tax you on money you didn't spend.
Right.
You know, so the thing is, you're able to set yourself up in the future to save money, and that money that you've saved is actually more of a gain for you, because it's money that you never spent.
Right.
So the government can't tax you on it.
Right.
That's the best return that you'll ever make.
Right. All right. So for everybody, investing in shoes, you heard this message. This is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Shoes, pickles. You can even think about, like, batteries.
Yeah.
You can think about all that kind of stuff. Now, you don't necessarily want to be a hoarder,
Right.
but you can also think about things like toilet paper. Toilet paper does not expire. Paper towels do not expire.
Right.
And those are things a lot of us need. And if you can find a good deal on that stuff, what I would recommend is getting it, and not turning your home into a storage unit.
Right.
But making sure that your pantry is full and filled with the things that you use on a regular basis, and filling up on those things when they're on sale.
Right. Right. Okay.
I think that's putting your money to use in the best way possible.
Okay. Yeah. I hear you.
Think
Okay.
about those things as being assets, and not only stocks and bonds and bank accounts and stuff.
Okay. Okay. Hear that. Okay. So now let's turn to, let's take it back to China.
Okay.
And then I want to take it back. I want to take it to, maybe seeing that as a foreshadowing of what we could see in the United States. Right. So we're talking about digital currency, right? And credit scores and everything, right?
Oh boy.
So, China, I mean, I don't really understand all of this, and I know there's a term for it, but China has this whole thing where, like, your credit gets affected based on, like, you breaking laws and stuff like that, right? So, like, if you cross the street, illegally, your credit score gets bumped down, right? Isn't it called, like, a social credit score or
They
something?
call
like
it ESG, environmental social governance.
Okay,
score,
environmental
I
social
think.
governance.
Yeah.
Okay, and just speaking into what if the United States, right? Because this is something that the federal government has been talking about rolling out by June of this year. Where they're going to have digital currency. There's a lot of mixed feelings about that. Some people, they think, oh, well, that's a great thing. We're going to have, digital currency. That way, you can keep track of your taxes, whatever, right? But then, of course, there's also this sort of angst about surveillance, right? And you had this analogy where you talked about meat. Can you talk a little bit? Give the people an explanation with that, because that it was funny, but it's not funny.
Yeah.
When
So
you actually,
this was the talk of the town at the World Economic Forum this year about programmable money, and what they were talking about was, let's say that you had reached your carbon limit for the month as far as consumption goes, and you know as well as I do that the top carbon culprit on the World Economic Forum's list, it's meat.
Right.
You know, so they want you eating as little meat as possible.
Yeah.
Now things like roach milk and stuff, on the other hand, you know, that's stuff that they have planned for down the road.
Right.
But what they want to do is have it set up so that, let's say you go to a restaurant, and you want to order, let's say you want to order a burger.
Right.
You know, you've had a rough day or something, and you just want to have a burger and fries or whatever. You go to pay, and the money is programmed not to allow you to buy more than a certain dollar amount or a certain quantity, like pounds of meat in a month.
Right.
All to make Greta Thunberg happy. All to save the planet.
Right.
And that is something that they are talking about. That's something that they want to roll out.
Right.
You know, and the alternatives that they're starting to recommend are things like roach milk and roach cheese and roach yogurt and stuff, which they're calling superfoods.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you one thing.
Super disgusting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, super disgusting. And the thing is, I'll bet you anything that there won't be there will probably be no consumption limits on roach cheese.
Right.
You know?
Right. Right.
But the thing is, they, you know, and the same thing would go for like gasoline, for instance. What they'll do is they'll put a limit on the amount of gasoline that you can purchase in a month. And you may be asking, well, how can they possibly do that? Well, the money that you're paid, it'll be digital currency that'll be programmable.
Yeah.
And that money, that'll be smart money. So that smart money will know that once you have reached a limit of buying a certain amount of something, then that money will be programmed not to transfer from your account to the other person's account.
Wow.
And one of the reasons I don't think that jives very, very well in the United States, and the reason it's such a good fit for China, is that we have the Fourth Amendment, which says that you and I have a right to our privacy and our personal papers.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And money that is programmable, that gives someone else the ability to control your consumption, you know, through the exchange of the money, I believe that's a violation of our Bill of Rights.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's, you know, apart from that, it's just kind of like, it's, you know, it's a little nerve wracking. You know what I mean? To be
Scary.
honest, right? Because it's like, that means everything that you do is basically going to be, you know, there's surveillance on that. You know what I mean? You know, you know, I mean, what happens when they start talking about you breathe too much air?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you consume too much water.
Well, yeah, you might exhale too much carbon dioxide, right? that you know?
Right. You know what I mean? So, you know, I know here in Florida, you know, the governor, Ron DeSantis, the great governor, Ron DeSantis, you know, we like him.
Yes.
As a governor. You know what I mean?
I'm very pleased with Ron DeSantis.
I'm not endorsing anybody. I'm just saying, you know, we like him as a governor. You know, I think he's hitting, you know, good targets when it comes to this. Like, we're not going for the, you know, for the digital currency thing, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but for me, like, I think we can take what we see and, you know, going on in China, you know what I mean? A lot of the surveillance and all this stuff, and we can use it as sort of a blueprint, you know what I mean? To where we can see our country going in the next, I don't know, 10, 20 years.
I think, and I think China is like the testing ground almost.
Yeah.
For a lot of this stuff.
Right.
You know, because the ESG is already there. And what we need to do is recognize that I think it's a terrible system that denigrates the value of human life. You know,
Right.
it commoditizes human life in saying, you know, it removes dignity from living, you know?
Right.
But the thing is, remember, unfortunately, the Chinese, they do not have a constitution that protects their right to privacy.
Right.
You know, they don't have the protections built into their system that we fortunately do here. Our system's not perfect,
Right.
you know, But the thing is, that is inconsistent with our system. That can't exist in our system without really overthrowing our system.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons that I think these people that are pushing for this kind of stuff, programmable money for the ESG and all that kind of stuff, I think they need to be labeled what they are. They're revolutionaries. They're working to overthrow our system that we have here.
Okay. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Overthrow the contract that the people have.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing, and we've got, again, we're not perfect, but we've got an incredible system here. I mean, our freedom to speak and speak our opinions, it's protected. I mean, it's constantly, there's constantly a tug of war over how to define it and stuff. But we have a wonderful system here. You know.
Well, the fact that we are even able to, have different interpretations about our system just lets you know that our system is a lot better than what they have in China, and
far.
and even to some extent, I would say in Western Europe, right? I mean, because there's some things that about Western Europe you can even kind of be like, man, that's a weird system. But anyways, I digress. But yeah, man, this has been fun, bro.
It's been great.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to have you here in the Sunshine State, and I hope it happens again soon.
Oh, for sure, man. We're gonna do this again. So yeah. All right. Well.
All right. I think that went well.